Well, hi guys, welcome, and who dat? I'm Joe. Thanks for tuning in to Rosenfield 10, where I cover our beloved, bless you boys, in black and gold, the New Orleans Saints. If you're a Who Dat fan, subscribe to my channel. Let's keep it in the Who Dat family. Consider me a friend or coworker who loves the Saints as much as you do. When you see one of my videos, I'm telling you what I think. You let me know in the comments what you think. Subscribe to the channel if you're a Saints fan. Come on board. We're talking about the draft all off season long. And in this video, we're going to be covering the third round of the 2026 NFL draft. We're going to be looking at 56 players that the Saints could consider taking in the third round. So let's talk about a bunch of players that the Saints can choose from. It's a bigger list this time around because a lot of these players' fate will be determined in the pre-draft process. We're talking about bowl games and the Senior Bowl in the East West is what I'm talking about, and then you've got your pro days and the combine and everything else, and then so some of these guys will rise. Some that I've already mentioned in rounds 1 and 2 will fall. And yeah, this is the point in the draft where you start to reach, or maybe some people's boards are just wildly different. A lot of the consensus is what I'm going with when I talk about player rankings here. But when you get to the third round and into the fourth round is when a lot of the variations happen. So between each list that you go to, you'll see a lot of players who are third round projections on some lists that are fifth round projections on other lists. So we're going to break it down into offense and the defense, and we're going to talk about all of them briefly, and we're going to highlight a few of my favorites for the Saints to choose in this round. This franchise is usually pretty good in the third and fourth round. Historically speaking, under Mickey Loomis, we've had lots of changes with scouting and player personnel and all that stuff. But overall, this team does pretty good in the third round and fourth round. So we're going to look at a bunch of them, and we're going to start with the offense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the big list up here, and that would be all of the offensive players. And we'll talk about defense later. And over here, we're going to highlight some different players, and there's a lot of players to look at here. So we're going to break up the offense into skill positions and then offensive line. So on this list, I do not have any quarterbacks mentioned. There are quarterbacks worth taking in the second round, in the third round, first round, but the Saints aren't in the business for a quarterback in the first 3 rounds, I don't think. So I'm not going to mention any quarterbacks here. In my last video covering the second round, I didn't talk about any running backs or any tight ends either because I thought that the second round was a little too rich for any player at those positions. You may see running backs and tight ends go off the board in the second round because teams who need that position filled are going to reach for the best ones available. I just personally don't think any of them are worth taking to the third round. So if the Saints or any other team decide to grab a tight end or a running back in the second round, it's because they wanted, first dibs. Let's pull up the skill positions here for the third round projections on offense. And we'll talk about these guys first. At the running back position, this is where, if you don't get Jeremiah Love in the first round, then I think the third round is when you're going to start seeing a bunch of running backs come off the board. All right, so Yeah, a bunch of them to choose from. A lot of different sites with different running backs at the top of the board, but I think the consensus right now is either running back Jonah Coleman out of Washington, running back Jadarian Price out of Notre Dame. I think those are the two that are at the top of most people's list. I've seen the running back from Arkansas, Washington, highlighted as a third round projection as well. But more consistently, you'll see running back Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska. You'll see both running backs from Penn State, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. And then on some boards, you'll see Seth McGowan out of Kentucky all the way in day three, sixth round, seventh round guy. He has the ability to be one of the best, regarded as one of the best running backs in this class. He had off the field issues. He had to work his way back into college. He's been with Kentucky a few years. It seems like he's over all those issues. Seth McGowan is a special talent. I think he's right around 6 foot, 215, maybe 215 pounds. Good speed. He's a good player. So I'm going to mention McGowan here as a third round prospect because of his talent. But yeah, there's a huge possibility he doesn't get drafted until day three. But let's focus more on the other guys. Jonah Coleman's about 5'9", but he's well over 200 pounds, like 220 something pounds. So Coleman is a bowling ball, and he's really good in pass protection. He's good at receiving, and yeah, he's really good at running the ball. He doesn't have great speed, but it's he's not slow. So I think Coleman is a well-rounded guy, and the only hesitation I have for the Saints drafting him is we kind of are missing a speed element, and Coleman I don't think will give you that top end speed. But as an all-around prospect, he's really good. Emmett Johnson is a average size guy too, probably around the same as McGowan, 215. I think Johnson's 5'11", 6 foot, something like that. He had 1,400 yards in college rushing. And yeah, he's probably going to get taken in the third round. I really like Katron Allen out of Penn State as a guy that can carry the load for you, well over 200 pounds. And he can, he can be an every down back for you. I think he needs to get better in the overall passing game area, especially blocking. So really like Coleman. I like Johnson. I really like Allen. The two I'm going to feature here, Jadarian Price out of Notre Dame. Of course, Love gets all the love from Notre Dame, but Jadarian Price, 5'11", 209, right around that Alvin Kamara size. Price has decent speed, about 4.45 speed, and he's a well-rounded, all-around guy. He needs to work on his pass protection too, but most running backs do need to work on that. Jadarian Price is one of those guys that will be the, after Love getting drafted, he'll be one of the first backs taken. Jadarian Price, I've seen him mocked to the Saints in the second round. And yeah, I think Coleman is a really good player that may also find his way in the second round. But I like Jadarian Price, and getting him in the third round would be great. If you don't get Love, if you focus on other positions of need in the first round and the second round. Third round's where you start to hit the running backs. Jadarian Price would be a great pick for us. The other running back I'm going to feature is Nick Singleton out of Penn State. Katron Allen is a stud. There's no doubt about it. And Nick Singleton, he looks really good at times. Most of the time, he's just your basic average running back. Well, Singleton's 6 foot, 224 pounds. He's got A lot of size to him. And we'll see how he tests at the combine if he participates or at his pro day. But the last 40 time I got from Singleton was sub 4.4. So when you're talking about a 224-pound guy running sub 4.4 40 at you or past you, yeah, that's pretty exciting. So Singleton's kind of an upright at 6 foot. He's not short. I think his style's a little upright, and I don't see a ton of wiggle or anything like that. Once he gets going, straight line speed, it's impressive. And yeah, I think he's well rounded, receiving the ball, running the ball. He can do it all, including pass protect, which is another reason I'm so high on Singleton in this third round for the running back. So I like Singleton. I think he'd be a steal in the fourth round. But it all depends on what our coaching staff's looking for. I think this room could use speed. And if you're just going to grab a fast guy, you can just wait until day three and grab a fast guy. I want a guy that's going to be able to help. We need, in my opinion, the running back room needs a stud. So Jeremiah Love's my favorite player for the team to draft right now. First round pick, get Love. Matt, you pair him up with AK, Kendre Miller, as an afterthought after that. You've got Neal and you've got Estime, who I think you should hold on to. And yeah, you need two running backs. Our Super Bowl team, like I said, had three good running backs, and we used all of them. We featured the speed element and the all around guy for 3 quarters, and then we pounded them in the submission with the third guy in the fourth quarter. So that's the way this team could be built. We're missing the speed element. We're missing kind of an X factor kind of guy. And this running back class this year coming out is, just okay. It's not great. But yeah, if you're just talking about a piece that's going to be part of like a three-headed monster, then yeah, I wouldn't mind getting Singleton or Jadarian Price. For that matter, Coleman, who could Coleman's a good player. He could end up being your starter. All right, let's look at wide receiver now. There's a lot of receivers here, and not all of these guys are going to be available. I only mentioned two receivers in the second round video, Elijah Surratt and Chris Bell. It's not like they're the only two receivers that are going to get taken in the second round. I just think that Surratt and Bell are the two that are worth the second round pick. Other players that may get drafted in the second round include Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee and Zachariah Branch out of Georgia and Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama. Those guys, I think it would be kind of a reach in the second round, but the receiving class is pretty good. And if any of those guys get taken in the second round, it'll be justified. I mean, you're trying to get your guy. You don't get a receiver in the first round. You grab one in the second round, you're good to go. So if Jeremy Bernard or Zachariah Branch or Chris Brazzell, the three Bs, Bernard, Branch, Brazzell, if they're all gone in the second round, it makes sense. But I think I value them more in the third round. Along with these other guys, Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana, Jacoby Lane out of USC, Antonio Williams out of Clemson, Skylar Bell out of UConn, Malachi Fields out of Notre Dame. These are the guys I'm focusing on at wide receiver in the third round. You get to the third round and Bernard, Branch, or Brazzell are still there. You're probably grabbing one of those guys. I really like Jeremy Bernard. I think he's a solid, average size build, 6 foot, something like that, 6'1". Possession kind of receiver. He's got some good ability after the catch. He might could bring you some special teams ability too. And Chris Brazzell, he's really tall and really fast. So I'm pretty sure somebody will take a chance on him in the second round. A guy I mention all the time, Zachariah Branch, is a guy I'm going to focus on here. Every time I mention Branch, I mention Branch in a negative light because of his size. And it's always with regards to the second round. I just think that grabbing a guy that's 5'10", 180 pounds in the second round opposite Chris Olave is kind of a risk. I mean, he's got yards after catch, and it's an aspect we don't have on this team. So the value for a player like that for the Saints is there. But to get him in the third round would be great. So I like Zachariah Branch as a returner, and I like him as a receiver, yards after catch. You know, he came up time and time again for Georgia, but he wasn't an every drive go to guy. You know, Branch would show up in moments, but it's not unlike Casey Concepcion. You think a guy like that can be a playmaker for you in spots. He's just not an every down guy. But I do like Branch, and I wanted to mention him in a positive light. Yeah, he would be a solid third round pick because you know he's going to give you something in special teams. And he has that run after catch ability that the Saints are lacking. Pulling up the big list again of primary playmakers on offense. I'm going to highlight Omar Cooper Jr. in a minute. Let's talk about Jacoby Lane, USC. He's really tall, 6'4" plus, and he's kind of skinny. In that aspect, he reminds me a little bit of Devon Vele. Sometimes I wonder about how tough Vele really is. I mean, Vele has been injured and missed time in both of his years in the league so far. So don't know if Vele, you know, can put on more pounds. It's something I wish he would do. I just wish I felt it's like a matchstick man or something. He's just the thin man out there. And Jacoby Lane kind of reminds me of the same. A guy that tall as Jacoby Lane, Devon Vele, he's going to have an advantage with his size. I just wish he was a little thicker, taking those hits, going up and coming down hard like we saw Vele do last year, leading to shoulder injuries. This stuff could happen. I just don't see a lot from Jacoby Lane when it comes to, route running and getting open and separation and everything else. And then as far as using his size, yeah, he's tall, but he's kind of lanky. So he would have a place on the team because we don't have 6'4" guys all over the place on our team. But definitely a third round guy for me. Antonio Williams out of Clemson, he's a smaller guy, 5'10" kind of guy. And he had a down year this past year, but he was regarded as the up and coming thing. So to get a guy with stud potential in the third round out of Antonio Williams would be good. Maybe Williams is a disappointment. People wanted him to be a higher rated guy, and he's here in the third round. But I think Williams has some tape in his college days from his past that you can get excited about. A guy that people are really excited about now with this past year, especially Skylar Bell out of UConn. He's another really small guy. So if you're going to get Zachariah Branch, Antonio Williams, or Skylar Bell, you're not really getting the perfect complement to Olave. But they're playmakers. They've made plays before. Bell made a ton of plays this year. And their third round projections, another guy that is more of a fourth round projection, but I'm mentioning here is Malachi Fields out of Notre Dame. He's big, big guy, 6'3", 6'4" guy, and thick. And so Fields is a guy that, you know, I think a lot of people might pass on. And yeah, if you're looking for a tall guy, you can go for Jacoby Lane or Chris Brazzell, or in my opinion, you can go with Malachi Fields, who I think has similar potential. Well, let's focus on wide receiver Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. I already mentioned Elijah Surratt. For the second round, probably my favorite receiver to get in the second round. And Omar Cooper Jr. is one of my favorite guys to get in the third round. Solid player, decent size. He's around 6 foot. So he would be a touch bigger than Olave with the weight. But other than that, not the perfect complement. But Omar Cooper Jr. is just a playmaker, makes great plays, real good with the sideline and in the middle. So I think Cooper would be a nice pick. As far as production goes, as a drive in, drive out receiver, I think that Cooper would be pretty good. He and Bernard, I would trust on a drive to drive basis, to be a starter and to be out there and to be trying to produce. A lot of these other guys have, a specialty. But yeah, wide receiver, there's going to be a bunch of these taken in the second round. So, but wide receiver is a position that's fun for fans, and it's something the Saints are looking for. I wanted to give you a variety. And now we're going to focus on tight end, and this third round is certainly where the tight ends are going to start coming off. A couple of these may go in the second round, but we're going to talk about Max Clare out of Ohio State, Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt, Justin Joly out of North Carolina State, Jack Indries out of Texas, Michael Trigg out of Baylor, Joe Royer, Cincinnati. That's a ton of tight ends. There's six of them right there, and there's a few more that may sneak into the third round that I'm looking at as fourth round guys. But I thought mentioning six here was a pretty good number. Max Clare's an all around guy, a good blocker, good receiver. Didn't get a lot of targets this past year, but I think Clare's going to end up being a solid player. If you want a guy that's, got some stuff going, running, run blocking and receiving, then I think Clare's the guy, the best all around guy. He's got decent size. Another good all around tight end on this list is Joe Royer out of Cincinnati. Good size, 250, I think those are your best bets as far as NFL built, ready made, can play in line blocker, and might give you something in the passing game. And I think that's what the Saints need. We need an all around guy. We have a receiving guy in Juwan Johnson. Okay, so for us to grab Michael Trigg out of Baylor would be like a redundancy. Now, you may think Trigg is just a superior player to Juwan Johnson. That's fine, but they're going to give you the same thing. A tall guy that's really good as a receiver, basically a big wide receiver. And if you ask him to run block at times, it's not going to work. Michael Trigg is exciting for people. They want to go look at the highlights of players, and when you see the highlight reel of Trigg, he made a catch in one game this past year when I couldn't believe what I watched. I rewound the tape and watched the catch 3 times. It was so impressive. And I was like, oh my God, who's this receiver? I was looking all over the place for Michael Trigg receiver out of Baylor and, eventually realized, oh, he's a tight end. And then, there were a few games that year where Trigg just made big catch, just amazing catches. But you can get a highlight reel of Juwan Johnson, that one-handed catch he made. Some of the catches Juwan makes last year when he caught it and did the somersault and everything else. You can do that with a lot of these players. I'm just giving you a heads up. If you're looking at highlight tape, then Michael Trigg's catches are going to impress the hell out of you. And just remember, somebody on another team could watch a highlight reel of Juwan Johnson and see that somersault and that one-handed catch and be like, wow. I'm just saying. So Trigg is here. Big wide receiver, yeah, definitely. But we already have that. It's kind of a redundancy. Eli Stowers is an average size tight end, so I worry about his future development as a solid all around run blocker. But Stowers is awesome at receiving the ball. I've drafted Stowers to the Saints in the fourth round a lot because if he's still there in the fourth round, it's a great pick, especially if you don't address wide receiver with a big body early. So I like Stowers in that aspect. Justin Joly out of North Carolina State is a guy that has the potential to be like the best tight end in this class. He's not so great at run blocking right now, but you see potential. And then he's a pretty good receiver. So he's got decent size. And I think Jolie, pardon me, could develop into a really, really good tight end. So to grab him in the third round would kind of be surprising. And at the same time, I'd be a little hopeful. Um, Jolie probably has a better chance of being that all around, really productive tight end. Better chance of him doing that than Jack Injuries. Injuries at 245, 240. It's kind of the same as Eli Stowers. You wonder how much he's going to give you as a run blocker, overall kind of tight end. Injuries has the ability to be an overall guy, especially if you can add a little bit more weight. But a lot of people say the tight end class is just okay this year, and I just wish there were more surefire all around guys because that's what we need. We need somebody to come in here and take Foster Moro's place and be a better overall player. I've heard some people say that, and it's true. It's really true. Juwan Johnson is your receiving tight end. We need an all around guy, and we just don't need another Nick Vanette or even a Jack Stoll, guys that are good at run blocking. You don't get much receiving. Moreau is a great player and personality and person, so I want Moreau on the team. I want him around the team, be an excellent coach. But if he stays on the team, he can't be our number two anymore. He just can't. So yeah, Max Clare is a popular pick for a lot of Saints fans doing mocks. Claire's a popular pick in the third round as an all-around guy and probably number one on my list of who to get. And Justin Joly right there. All right, offensive line to round out the third round prospects on offense. A ton of tackles here. Isaiah World out of Oregon. Max Ihenacore. I don't know how to pronounce that dude's name. Arizona State. Carter Smith, tackle out of Indiana. Brian Parker Jr., who I've mentioned a bunch, tackle out of Duke. Yeah, those guys are just okay. I think the guy from Arizona State might make it at tackle. Carter Smith might make it at tackle. But Parker the second and Isaiah World, those tackles might be better as guards. Isaiah World at one point had a solid second round grade, but I would not risk taking him until the third round, and my idea would be to move him to guard. So World is here, could be gone off the boards in reality by the time the third round comes. And if I drafted him, yeah, I'd want him to play guard. Carter Smith, the guy from Arizona State, maybe Brian Parker the second. Those guys could make it a tackle, but this Saints team needs guards, and that's what I'm going to focus on here. I've got the last five players mentioned as interior offensive linemen because only one of them played guard this year on this list, Keelan Rutledge. Everyone else as an interior offensive line here in the third round are centers, and that's what I was saying in multiple videos. I think the center class is good. Most people think it's just okay, but you have way more options at center than you do at guard. So remember, so far out of the first round and second round, I've only mentioned three guards, and there's only one here worth taking in the third round. And that would be Keelan Rutledge, the guard out of Georgia Tech. Man, Rutledge is a stud. 6'4", 320 pounds. Rutledge has that late day three or late round three, early round four kind of grade. But since there's few guards in this draft, you might want to reach and grab one. And in the third round, I think Keelan Rutledge would make a lot of sense. He's a pretty good guard. I think he's going to be a stud in the league. So I'm high on Rutledge, especially if you want to focus on other things. Everyone wants to get the guard in free agency. We know, and we should get a couple of them. But if you want to get a young guy in the pipeline with a hell of a lot more ability than Torricelli Simpkins, or even Saldiveri for that matter, then I think Rutledge would be your guy. And I definitely wanted to highlight him here in the third round as being the one, true guard. And the rest of these guys are centers. Jake Slaughter out of Florida is a good center. I think he's very good. I think he's a solid guy. And Parker Brailsford had a bad year. Alabama's offensive line is not that good. Brailsford, to me, I wouldn't even think about taking till the fourth round, but I'm mentioning him here because he's got a lot of time on task. I'm not sure if Alabama played Brailsford at other positions. I think they did. So there may be some versatility there. And Logan Jones out of Iowa is really good, a good technician. I just worry about the lack of size. He's like 290, and the lack of strength worries me from time to time. But if Jones goes to an offense where the center's asked to move a lot, then he's going to be pretty good. And the last guy I'm going to mention, Pat Coogan out of Indiana. He played center for Indiana this year, and he looks really good. Coogan's a good guy, but he came over, I think, from Notre Dame. And at Notre Dame, he played guard. So Coogan is a guy that plays center this year, but you can see him moving to guard. And I would keep my eye on Coogan. I think he's a guy that it would not surprise me gets taken pretty early in day three or round three. And we need guards, so I'm highlighting him. Okay, that's the offense, and man, that's 29 players. It's a lot of names to have up flashing in your face, but the reason why I do this as a Saints content provider is because nobody else does. Saints content providers don't go this deep with the draft. And when they do mocks and stuff like that, most of them don't show you the players, and you're having to remember everybody's name and everything else. And I think this is something I would want to see as a Saints fan. We're going to talk about third round prospects. Pull the whole damn list up. Let me look at them. And that way, if I want to start to make up my own mind about who I want to take in the draft, I'll have the list. Now, I could have pulled all of these guys up and taken up the whole screen, but that was the offensive guys. And now we're going to pull up the big list of defensive guys, a little shorter. I showed you 29 offensive guys. This list of defensive players has 27 players on it. And we're going to split these guys up between the front seven and the DBs. So we're going to pull up the front seven first. We've got defensive tackles, edge rushers, and defensive ends, and linebackers. A couple of these players were mentioned on the last video for round two. Edge rusher Joshua Josephs was featured on round two, and edge rusher defensive end Gabe Akis out of Illinois was also mentioned in the last video. At DB, I mentioned Keontae Scott, and I have him mentioned here as well, because I think Scott being a true nickel, you're not quite sure whether someone's going to pull the trigger on him in the second round or not. I mentioned him in the second round because there's a chance we trade down at some point, pick up a later second round pick. I'm hoping something like that happens. Mickey Loomis said it's not out of the question, even though he never does it. But also, if you lose Alontae Taylor and you want to cover your bases, then Nickelback's pretty important. Scott's the best one, so taking him in the second round wouldn't be a awful idea. But I'm mentioning him again here in the third round because he very well could be available. And at linebacker, I had mentioned in the last video for the second round, Josiah Trotter and Jacob Rodriguez. So a lot of repeat names on this list. So just bringing that up, let's talk about defensive tackles. Dominique Orange out of Iowa State, also known as Big Citrus. He's a guy that is, a nose tackle type. Big guy, run stuffer, put him in the middle of the defensive line. A lot of people like him. He had games this past year where he looked bad. So it's one of them things where, yeah, when he looks good, he looks good. He's the part. But there were several games where, he had little to no impact and actually wasn't very good at all. So I'm hesitant about taking Big Citrus until the fourth round. But I have to mention him here in the third round because this is where the big bodied nose tackle types are going to start coming off the board. It makes sense in round three. And if you need a guy like that, these guys are there. Dante Corleone is another guy out of Cincinnati who reminds me of Big Citrus. Huge man, looks really good at times, and then there's times when he just disappears and has no effect whatsoever. If you need the part on your team, these guys are there in the third round. We do need everything on the defensive line, so I'm mentioning them here. I personally wouldn't take Orange or Corleone over the next three guys. Daryl Jackson Jr. out of Florida State, Ahmad Moten Sr. out of Miami, Tim Keenan III out of Alabama. Tim Keenan III out of Alabama is a good player, solid. I would take him in the fourth round and feel really good about it. I mentioned him here in the third round, but I probably wouldn't take him in the third round. Daryl Jackson Jr. is another guy who I really like a lot. And when I mock him to the Saints, oh, I've got a bad back today. When I mock Jackson to the Saints, it's always in the fourth round. A guy that I've grown to like a lot lately is Ahmad Moten Sr. Of course, Miami being in the national championship and winning all of these playoff games has has players that have had the opportunity to progress, to show a lot against major competition, and Moten did. 6'3", 325 pounds. I like Moten a lot. I think Moten would be a third round guy for me, and Jackson would be a third round guy for me. If it's something that this team really wants, we need it. You need the nose tackle type for this defense to work. And even though, we've got a piece right now, it's, and some backups, it's one of them things the Saints could focus on. And like I say, these guys, some of them may last till the fourth round, so we'll see. At edge rusher, man, gotta highlight Joshua Josephs again. 6'3", 240 pounds. His pass rush is exceptional. And if you're gonna draft an edge rusher and expect him to rush the passer, but he's not going to be an every down guy and be that great against the run, then it's hard for me to take a guy like that in the first round or second round. So a guy like David Bailey, that sounds great, and he's really good against the pass, rushing the passer, but I don't know how he's going to hold up against the run. And then you have those issues. We need an outside linebacker, and preferably a really good edge rusher. A guy that was good against the run too would be nice. Joshua Josephs is so good against the pass, rushing the passer, that I would consider him in the second round. But in the third round, if he's still there, that would be great. And Gabe Akis, I also mentioned in the second round, he's a defensive end, but he can stand up and rush the passer too. And yeah, if Akis is still there in the third round, then that's a solid pick. Another big guy that would fit at defensive end for the Saints would be Denai Dennis Sutton out of Penn State. People say he had a down year. He had 8.5 sacks. So I think he forced 3 or 4 fumbles. So yeah, if that's a down year, give me that guy. He's 260 pounds. So Dennis Sutton is, a tweener kind of guy. Defensive end in a 4-man front, 5-man front, yeah, certainly. Stand up edge rusher all the time, I don't know. But he did both, and it all depends. I feel like at 260 pounds, he needs to go one way or the other. He needs to either gain a little more weight or needs to lose a little more weight. But in my mind, I see denied Dennis Sutton as a defensive end, putting another 5 pounds on or 10 pounds on and being a versatile piece. And another guy that's going to be primarily a stand-up edge rusher is another one I'm going to focus here on. Derek Moore out of Michigan. One of the more underrated edge rushers in this class, 6'3", 260 pounds. So the same as denied Dennis Sutton, except Moore, in my opinion, is a stand-up pass rush guy. He can give you something against the run too. He's thick enough to be able to hold up against the run pretty good. And we'll see what Derek Moore can evolve into. But in my opinion, right now, he's a pass rush, stand up pass rusher, and he's really good. Most of these simulators have Moore as a early fourth round guy, late third round, early fourth round. But if you don't get a pass rusher in the first round or the second round, Joshua Josephs or Derek Moore would be a guy. And it's a guy I had to focus on here. The last position we're going to talk about in the front seven, the linebackers. I already mentioned Josiah Trotter, though I misspelled his name on the last video. I already mentioned Josiah Trotter and Jacob Rodriguez. Both of them really good linebackers. Linebackers not the greatest need, in my opinion, for the Saints, even if Davis retires. See, people want to just cast Pete Werner away and say, nah, he's not even an option. Werner was always going to be the guy to take Davis's place, should Davis have retired, which we kind of been expecting for the last 3 years, and it just never happened. Now we're trying to replace Werner. Werner's almost like an afterthought. But man, with Stallbird and Stutzman and Ford, I think you have a backup for Davis. At least a guy for right now. Now, you want to go get a stud, that's great. And yeah, having a middle linebacker stud would be great. We've had one for years, so it would it would be different if you didn't have a stud at middle linebacker. Now we got Stutzman. People want Stutzman to be that guy. So I just don't think linebacker is all that important. But Josiah Trotter is impressive. And of course, Jacob Rodriguez, once again. 6'1", 230 pounds. He's a little short, he's a little light, and he's a serious playmaker. And I just don't hear anyone talking bad about him at all. I don't even know what his negatives are. He's good in coverage, he's good against the run. He's all over the place. He has a nose for the ball. Yeah, and he can play quarterback and running back. So, I really like Rodriguez. Like I said, these mocks have him in the fourth round all the time. I mentioned him in the second round. I mentioned him in the third round. I even mentioned him in the first round because his stat line is just so impressive. So let's talk about these other linebackers. Jake Golday out of Cincinnati. I was watching highlights halfway through the college season, and I caught a Cincinnati game, and I wrote Jake Golday's name down because he was a massive dude against the run, and he just was just making play after play against the run, and I thought this is a stud. And then I started doing some mock drafts and I started looking for his name and he was all the way down in the sixth round, seventh round. I'm like, man, okay, well maybe I just saw a good game by him and maybe he's not a good player. And then no, all of a sudden these mock simulators started having him rise up. I guess after an impressive year like he's had, eventually everyone else was going to catch up to where I was because I like Gold Day. I don't know what he brings you as far as coverage or rushing the passer, but against the run, he's a stud. And I think our team's going to focus on guys who can tackle. Stopping the run's a great idea. Stutzman is a run stuffer. And yeah, Gold Day, a guy I'm going to talk about as a good run stopper. I like Deontay Lawson out of Alabama. I think he's an all around guy. I think in the third round, he's a solid pick. For someone who needs a linebacker, I think Lawson would be a good pick for this team. He would have to take Davis's place. And then, of course, Harold Perkins out of LSU. I love that guy. They've asked him to do so much at LSU and never could really find his place. I think his place is more like a star guy where he can rush the passer on some plays, play linebacker on some plays, and drop him in coverage in some plays. You know, it's a misuse, and I think Perkins would be a higher rated guy because as an athlete, he's going to be impressive. He is impressive. I mean, at the combine, I think he's going to be impressive. So Perkins is a guy that I think could work in this Brandon Staley defense for the Saints pretty good. I just, I mean, what do you guys think? If you're an LSU fan, do you think Harold Perkins should have just been an edge rusher the whole time? Or do you think we should have kept him, at outside linebacker? Or do you think he should make the transition to middle linebacker? Or do you think he's a potential star player that can actually cover from the nickel and give you all of that too? Let me know what you guys think about Perkins. I think he would fit in this defense pretty good. All right, that's the front seven guys from this long defensive list. And now we're going to finish this video out by pulling up the DBs. We have a repeat cornerback mentioned here in Keontae Scott from the second round. I like him as the best nickelback in the draft. I'm also going to mention Keith Abney II out of Arizona State. Abney II is probably going to get drafted in the second round. I didn't mention him in the second round because I'm not so much of a fan of going get him for the Saints. But he is talented. And if the Saints feel he's worth the 42nd pick in the second round, then yeah, they know better than me. Go ahead and grab him. I feel more comfortable grabbing him in the third round, as most teams would feel grabbing Keontae Scott in the third round. I think that makes more sense for a lot of teams. The rest of these cornerbacks, Julian Neal out of Arkansas, really good size. That's a stud. He may end up a second round pick when it's all said and done. He's at the top of the list in the third round for me. Third round cornerback to come in and compete with the rest of the guys on the team. Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad move. You could focus on, maybe positions you think are really important. And then cornerback in this draft, I think, is pretty deep. So I think there's going to be some really good players taken in the third round. Julian Neal's one of those guys with the size. D'Angelo Pons out of Indiana is one of those guys without the size. But man, when you watch Pons play, and if you guys have been watching the playoffs, you see how good Pons is. He's just a stud. People talk about he's too small to make it in the league, and I just see him making play after play. Not unlike Mike Sainristil, who was a true nickel, who's just completely undersized and it shows from time to time with Sainristil. He also shows how good of a playmaker he is because he's always around the ball. And yeah, that's my comp to Pons. Pons plays on the outside a lot. So that's the deal. You want to get a really super energetic, athletic player like this who's just small. Where do you take him? You want to take a chance on a guy like this in the second round? Probably not. In the third round, I think you have to start considering it because you could have a home run with D'Angelo Ponds if he, turns into like the production of a Mike Sainristil. A guy like Ponds, who's like 5'10" or 5'9", he's really short. A guy like him is gonna get exposed in the league. But man, he's a playmaker. Okay, Malik Muhammad out of Texas. We have a couple of former Texas coaches on our team, and I think they like Muhammad. It would not surprise me if Muhammad is a pick for the Saints in the third round. We'll see. I like him as a player overall. Devin Moore out of Florida is a decent player with decent size. Davison Igbinosun out of Ohio State is a guy that's got a lot of experience. I'm not a huge fan of his, but he's operated all over the field for Ohio State, so you got to keep that in mind. Will Lee the third out of Texas A&M is a super stud, really good, solid cornerback, and yeah, he's been draft eligible for a couple of years now, and always around this third round range. It's a really good round for cornerback. Chandler Rivers is the last corner I'm going to mention here. He's a little undersized, not as small as Pons, but Rivers has some good tape out of Duke. Chandler Rivers has a late second round, third round kind of grade. So Rivers has some talent. And these safeties are pretty talented too. I'm not highlighting anybody else besides Keontae Scott here again for the cornerbacks. I'll mention him one more time. If we don't re-sign Taylor, we need our bases covered at nickel. That's what I said about Keontae Scott before. 6 foot, 192 pounds. I think third round makes a lot of sense for Scott. And if we don't re-sign Taylor, Scott makes a lot of sense for the Saints. Let's talk about these safeties. Zakee Wheatley out of Penn State. I hear that he's pretty good against the run, so that's something that you can keep in mind. I think Wheatley's an all-around guy. I like Wheatley a lot. Xavier Scott out of Illinois is a smaller guy, but he's very active. I believe he's played cornerback and safety, so perhaps he played majority corner in his college career. I really should have looked that up before talking about him, but I've seen him on these simulators as a cornerback on some of them, and he's a safety, but he's small, so we'll see what happens. Scott's a pretty good player either way. Jalen Kilgore out of South Carolina is a guy that I've always liked, being an SEC fan of LSU. I see a lot of South Carolina, and Kilgore makes a lot of plays, so I'm a fan of his. And the last guy I'm going to mention, Genesis Smith out of Arizona. Well, my favorite band of all time is Genesis. My second favorite band of all time is the Smiths. A guy named Genesis Smith seems like it's a match made in heaven. Like he was put on this earth to be a safety that I'm going to love. So, Genesis Smith, come on, man. My brother, come on, man. Come on. You almost have to draft him, right? Well, Arizona, they run a defense that their players are going to transition into Brandon Staley's mix match zone stuff pretty good. So the cornerback out of Arizona I like a lot, and the safety I like a lot. My only issue with Genesis Smith is he needs to get better as a tackler. Just doesn't tackle good enough for me. And I think this team's going to prioritize tackling quite a bit. So, Ravina. I saw that, yeah. My cats. Ugh. I think Genesis Smith will fit into this defense. I just think Smith needs to get way better at tackling. All right, there you go. This has been almost an hour long video, but there were 56 players for me to mention. The third round for the Saints. The Saints usually do really good here, and massive list here. You know, the third round's going to only have about 40 players drafted, so I've got our bases covered with 56 players here. Some of these guys will go in the second round. Some of them will still be on the board in the fourth round. I don't know if I'm going to do another video like this covering just the fourth round or if I'm going to cover day three in general, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh round. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10 and you will find out when I figure it out. I love presenting this stuff to you guys, my Saints family. I know you guys love the Saints. You want to know what's going on with the Saints. Maybe you don't have the time to spend hours and hours and hours watching all of the videos and doing the research I've done on these college players, and you just want quick little video talking about it. And that's what I'm here for, guys. I've got a first round video, bunch of them. I've got a second round video, got a third round video, and you guys, as Saints fans, can enjoy this pre-draft process through the scope of a Saints fan, what's good for the Saints. You can go to these national places and hear who they think the Saints should take, and it's always a bunch of junk. They don't know the Saints like we do. So subscribe to my channel and leave a comment. I will respond. I will definitely notice it and read it. And if you ask me a question, I'll respond for sure. And until the next one, who dat? And I'll talk to you later. Who dat?